For the next few minutes, I want you to go on this journey with me that apparently started the moment I was born. A journey I never assumed that I would take, one that will continue long after this talk is over. So please indulge me for a moment as I talk about my mom and the assumptions that I'd even forgotten about. As I began preparing for this talk, I of course ran ideas by my mom. She's always someone that I bounce ideas off of and someone that makes me think of things in a different light. I remember telling her about the fact that I was thinking of starting off this talk with one of the earliest assumptions I made about my own life. I remember when we were leaving Seychelles, an island in the Indian Ocean where I lived till I was 8 years old. Although I was born in India, we lived in Seychelles for my dad's job. I remember being happy there. I mean, it was a tropical island, who wouldn't be happy there? But even in that moment of leaving Seychelles forever, I look happy. There's a picture of me on the day that we're leaving, smiling and toothless while leaning on my packed bag. By the way, I've never shared this picture publicly, so please be gentle. As I reflect on that day, I remember being happy because I had assumed that we were going to India and New Jersey to visit family and would shortly return home. I had no idea that home was going to become Paramus, New Jersey, land of the malls. As I said all this to my mom, she of course had a very tentative look on her face. Many of you may remember a similar look that your mom has given you. It's a look that she's given me often. It's a look that says that she's already thought of something different as I've said something. It's a look I also know well. Apparently, it's a look that I also inherited at a young age. I asked my mom, "What are you thinking?" She responded by saying, "Well, what about when you were born?" In that moment, I took a second to reflect. When I was born, what did that have to do with assumptions? I was intrigued. After all, my mother is brilliant, meaning I had missed something. She went on to say, "Well, most assumed that you wouldn't survive, and look at you now." And that was it. Epic mic drop. I hadn't thought about the assumptions made about me the moment I was born. My mom was right after all, as she most often is. I was a preemie, I weighed less than 2 pounds at birth, and I was in an incubator for about a month after my birth. Most of my family members were even afraid to hold me when I was finally released from the hospital just because of how small I was. My mom often tells a story about the fact that I used to have to wear baby doll clothes as an infant because nothing else fit. No one but my mom had assumed that I'd make it out of the hospital, let alone survive, live, and thrive. And that goes to show you the kind of woman that my mom is and always will be. Growing up, I assumed that everybody's mom was like my mom, selfless, full of unconditional love, and forever my #1 fan. I kept this illusion alive well through high school. It wasn't until college that my illusion began to break. I began to see the interactions that my friends had with their moms and noted the difference. But the reality truly hit when I began my first position at Bergen Community College. It was in that environment that I came to recognize the privilege that I came from in so many different ways. My mother's love and support was just one of them. At Bergen, I became that parental figure for so many of my students that did not have a mom like my own. A mom who to this day will still do anything and everything for me, possibly even at the cost of her own happiness. I began to let my assumptions about the love that parents give their children fade as my students told me their stories. But I digress. I could talk about my mom for days. We only have a few days at this conference. And also, we're here to talk about assumptions today. So that's actually the earliest assumption made about me. It's one that I don't even remember myself. It's one told by my mom. And the point is that it starts that early. Assumptions happen everywhere for everyone all the time. We either make them about ourselves or others make them for us, or there's ones that we don't remember. Yet they all impact us in some way. So let's go back to the earliest assumption that I made that I can remember, because that's where it all started for me. I had assumed that we were going to Paramus, New Jersey to visit family, as we had often done. My mother's family lived in India, while my father's lived in New Jersey. Naturally, I assumed we'd spend a few weeks in India and a few weeks in New Jersey before returning home. It's why I look so darn happy in this picture, as opposed to my mom and my sister, who looked anything but happy that day. A few weeks into our stay in New Jersey, I came to realize that this was not our average summer visit. Something had changed. This was now home. That fall, I started the 3rd grade, and I remember being excited but nervous at the same time, like any other child would be. I remember feeling different. No child knew where Seychelles was, the island on which I grew up. Many of them didn't even believe that it existed. Others couldn't believe that I was born in India because my English was so good. It's one of the reasons I had to go through the mandatory speech and language test at the school, not once, but twice. The assumption had been the first time I passed that it was just pure luck. At that age, I couldn't understand why I had to take the test twice. But as the years have passed, I'm no longer shocked by the amount of people who say to me, "But you don't have an accent," when I tell them that I was born in India. In those moments, I'm left to wonder if an accent is the only way to determine if someone's native to another country. Is an accent the only way to authenticate my immigrant status? If I don't have an accent, am I less Indian? These questions sound silly, but they cross my mind each and every single time my lack of an accent is questioned. I wonder if our students have similar thoughts when their accents or lack of accents are questioned. These thoughts of ethnic authenticity crossed my mind as I applied to college and entered college. As my parents began boasting about the fact that I would be attending the College of New Jersey to complete my bachelor's, my extended family began to assume that I would be studying nursing. After all, that's one of the more prominent programs at the institution, the one that they knew well, and what else could I possibly study as a young Indian woman? Many of them were confused when they found out that I'd be majoring in music education. My immediate family was forever supportive of me and proud, but my extended family took longer to adjust. All of these experiences impacted the image I had of myself. As a child growing up with no accent, I questioned how Indian I was and began to assume that I was not Indian enough. When my extended family began to assume that I was studying nursing, I began to assume that my major in music education was not good enough. Unfortunately, with my family's love and support, I knew the subjects in which I would excel. Gardner mentions the fact that students develop assumptions and expectations, what he calls primitive biases stereotypes, by virtue of living as a human being in a world with certain expectable physical and social dimensions. We encounter this every day. I see it in myself, and I see it in my students. When I began my first student affairs position at Bergen Community College, I had assumed that all of the students were those that had not done well in high school and were attending the two-year institution due to their lack of effort in high school. I say this admitting my poor, inaccurate, and sensitive assumptions about community college students. It was at Bergen that my assumptions were broken, but also where I helped students break the assumptions that they made about themselves. So many of my students came to my office saying that they could only ever be a doctor because culturally that was what they were meant to do. But they hated the field of medicine, or they were truly bad at math and science. How does that student feel then? I know I often felt terrible about the fact that I was bad at math and science because the assumption was that I would excel in those subjects. I felt like a failure. It's a feeling that I never wanted for my students. But luckily, my family was able to support me, and I knew that I would go on to obtain a master's and a doctorate. But so many of my students at Bergen thought that Bergen was their last stop. Nobody ever told them that there was a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate in their future. They assumed that was not possible. They had accepted the environment and the restrictions crafted for them by the people around them. They had become their assumptions, a self-fulfilled prophecy of sorts. What I realized during my time at BCC was that not all of our students have the same support systems that I did and still do to this day that help me break the assumptions that I've grown so accustomed to around me. What if they don't have a prominent parental figure, friend, mentor, or whoever that can help them break the assumptions made about them and formulate their own identity? My students and my mentors help me do this every single day. So what role do we play in the lives of our students and our colleagues? Fitch and Kirby state, like many other professors, we had in the past viewed students' assumptions as a barrier to effective learning, rather than as a starting point for discussion. What if we did the same thing? Let's start using the assumptions we make, or our students make, as the catalyst for change to break those very same assumptions. What if we allow our students and our colleagues a space to tell us who they are and not assume what their story may be? As a student affairs professional, I attempt to allow my students and my colleagues the time to tell me who they are. I try not to assume what their narrative may be. I provide them with the safe space to tell their story. Sometimes their stories do in fact reaffirm parts of my thoughts, but most of the times their stories just leave me speechless. They break each and every single assumption. And when I hear an assumption, I try to challenge them. I challenge them to think beyond the assumption and to think of their true potential, their true passion, and their true vision for themselves. If the assumption goes unchallenged, then we have failed. But again, remember to not make assumptions about your students. Be present in the moment and challenge your own thinking. Because it's in the moments where I have allowed my assumptions to become the voice of the students that the voice often gets taken away. The student's story goes untold, and the student becomes silent. And if I'm really unlucky, the student has marked me off as another person who just doesn't get them and want to know who they are. I know when that interaction is happening in front of me, and I see it as another student who I've lost. I am by no means perfect. I work on breaking my own assumptions every single day. It's not easy, but it's worth it. So here's my challenge to all of you today about assumptions. Don't make them. But when you struggle, here are some tips to help you along. Know your own assumptions that you've made about your students or your colleagues and work to break them. Encourage your students to know when they are living out the assumptions made by others of them. When you hear a colleague or a student make an assumption about themselves or a peer, speak up, tell them, and challenge them. Don't allow the assumptions that we have grown up making to dictate the stories that have yet to be told. Allow our students and our colleagues a space to tell their narratives and thus tell their stories. Who knows what we will learn about each other when we stop assuming anything at all? Thank you.